For nearly 2 decades, America watched the Duggar family grow, change, and navigate life in a way that felt almost familiar. We saw Michelle with her gentle voice, Jim Bob leading the home, and the daughters Jana, Jill, Jessa, and Jinger moving through life with the kind of harmony that made millions of viewers feel connected to them. But even in the most watched families, not everything is seen. And there was one chapter in the Duggar family story, a quiet, almost invisible chapter, that the cameras never captured. A year when silence slowly replaced updates. A year when the sisters, who once shared everything, suddenly withdrew from the public eye. A year when even longtime viewers commented, "Why do the girls feel so distant lately?" This hidden season didn't begin with drama. It began with something far more subtle, a shift inside the heart of the eldest daughter, Jana Duggar. Jana had always been the calm center of the family. The one who carried responsibility without complaint. The one who smiled quietly through every moment. But early one morning, before the sun had even risen over Springdale, Jana walked into the living room and found something unexpected. Jim Bob sitting alone, holding a letter. Not bills. Not notes. Not a schedule. A letter in Michelle's handwriting. A letter so old that the edges had softened with time. Jana's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen Jim Bob look this way before. His eyes were distant, his hands trembling slightly, as if he were holding a piece of the past that still had the power to break him. When he noticed Jana, he folded the letter too quickly, too nervously, too protectively. "Morning, sweetheart," he said softly. But the voice wasn't steady. It carried a weight Jana couldn't name. That was the first sign. Small, silent, but unforgettable. And as the days passed, Jill noticed the tension in the home too. Jessa felt a strangeness in the air but couldn't explain it. Jinger, now older and wiser, sensed something deeper beneath the surface. Something emotional. Something hidden. What none of them knew was that Jana would soon make a discovery that would reopen a part of their mother's life that had been sealed away for more than 20 years. Jim Bob stood at the attic entrance, breathing slowly, as if each breath weighed more than the last 20 years of silence he had carried. Jana felt her heart squeeze slightly. Jill lowered her gaze. Jinger's fingers tightened around her letter. Jessa sat very still. Too still. The way she always did when something felt dangerously real. Their father stepped inside. The wooden floor creaked beneath him. He rested a hand on an old shelf, steadying himself as if the truth inside the attic might knock him off his feet. His eyes moved from daughter to daughter, before settling on the box, Michelle's box. Her handwriting. Her final words. Something inside him seemed to break. Quietly, softly, but unmistakably. "You weren't supposed to find those," he said in a low, shaking voice. Jana spoke gently. "Dad, how long have you kept these?" Jim Bob swallowed. "Since the week your mother passed." Jill gasped softly. "Dad, that was more than 20 years ago." He nodded, ashamed. "I know." Jinger's voice trembled. "Why didn't you give them to us?" "Mom wrote them for us, didn't she?" Jim Bob's eyes lowered. "She did. Then why hide them?" Jessa's voice cracked with a sharp mix of hurt and confusion. Jim Bob hesitated. And that hesitation was the first real admission that there was more to this story than any of the daughters had imagined. He moved closer, lowering himself onto an old trunk, as if the weight of what he was about to say required him to sit. "I didn't hide the letters because of what's in them," he said quietly. "I hid them because of what they would force me to face." Jill blinked. "Force you to face what?" Jim Bob looked at the ceiling for a long moment, his eyes glassy. "Your mother was the strongest woman I ever knew," he began slowly. "But she carried things. From her childhood. From her early life. From before we met." He paused, and those things shaped her in ways neither you nor I ever fully understood. Jana leaned forward. "Dad, did Mom ever tell you what was in these letters?" He shook his head. "No, not fully." Jinger whispered. She wrote us each a personal letter. And one letter with no name. Hearing that, Jim Bob closed his eyes in pain. The unnamed letter. He murmured. That was the one I was most afraid of. Jessa felt a cold ripple across her skin. What's in it, Dad? Jim Bob didn't answer immediately. His breathing grew heavier. He placed both hands on his knees, leaning forward slightly, as if preparing himself for a storm. When your mother and I first married, he said slowly, I knew she had lived through things. Hard things. Traumatic things. But she never found the right moment to tell you all. Jill whispered. So she wrote these instead. Jim Bob nodded gently. She wrote them in her last months. Every night, after you girls would go to bed, she'd sit in the living room with a blanket over her legs, a cup of tea turning cold beside her. And she wrote. There was no anger in his voice. Only love. And grief. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see her writing with tears on her cheeks, he continued. But she always smiled at me and said, they'll understand one day. Jana felt tears forming in her eyes. Dad, we weren't children forever. Why didn't you tell us when we grew up? Jim Bob lowered his head. Because every time I looked at you girls, I saw how much you loved your mother. And I was terrified that her truth would change the way you remembered her. None of the sisters spoke. Their father's voice broke. I didn't want you to remember her for her pain. I wanted you to remember her for her love. Jill suddenly understood. All the small silences Michelle carried. All the days she seemed tired without reason. All the moments she hugged them just a little tighter. All the nights she sat alone quietly. Those weren't signs of distance. They were signs of a past she never wanted her children to carry. Jinger wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. Dad. Whatever Mom wrote. We're strong enough to know now. We need to know. For her. For us. Jim Bob looked at her. Really looked at her. His eyes soft and wounded. I believe that now, he whispered. But for years, I didn't. He took a slow breath. That's why I kept the letters. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting your mother's memory. Protecting the family. Jessa stepped closer, her voice gentler than before. Dad, keeping the letters didn't protect us. It only delayed the truth. Jim Bob nodded painfully. You're right. And I'm sorry. Those 3 words the Duggar sisters had rarely heard from their father, cracked something open inside them. But there was still more. Jana looked at the unnamed envelope. Dad? What about this one? Mom wrote, tell the truth. What truth was she talking about? Jim Bob's face went pale. He reached out and touched the envelope gently, almost reverently. That letter, he whispered, is the truth she could never speak. The truth she wanted all of you to carry together, not alone. And it's the truth I was most afraid of. The room felt suddenly smaller. Quieter. As if the attic, the house, the memories themselves were leaning in to listen. Jana held her father's gaze. Dad, it's time. He closed his eyes. A tear escaped. I know, he whispered. And as he opened his eyes, the sisters felt it. The truth they were about to read would change every part of their family's story. In the weeks that followed, the air inside the Duggar home shifted in ways the sisters couldn't quite explain. There was no argument. No announcement. No sudden moment that marked the change. But something was different, and the first person who felt it was Jill. Jill had always been the emotional heartbeat of the family, soft-spoken, thoughtful, the sister who carried the weight of everyone else's worries, even when she didn't mean to. She sensed things long before others noticed. One afternoon, Jill walked past Jim Bob's office and saw him sitting at his desk, staring at the same old letter Jana had seen earlier. He didn't notice Jill. He didn't hear her footsteps. He was lost, not in paperwork, not in planning or schedules, but in memory. His shoulders were stiff, his eyes unfocused, his breathing slow and heavy. Jill froze. She had seen her father tired before, overwhelmed before, but never haunted. That night, while the rest of the house buzzed with chores and noise, Jill found Jessa in the kitchen folding laundry. Have you noticed Dad acting strange? Jill asked softly. Jessa paused, her hands stopping mid-fold. Yes, she admitted. He seems distracted, and he keeps going into Mom's old room. He never does that. Jill nodded. I think something's wrong, she whispered. Something he's not telling us. Jessa didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth had already begun to take shape between them. A few days later, Jinger felt it too. Jinger, now older, more reflective, had learned to see her family through a different lens after moving away. Distance had given her perspective, and perspective had given her clarity. She had returned home for a visit, nothing unusual. Just a simple family stop. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt an unfamiliar heaviness in the air. The house was warm. The usual smell of dinner cooking, children laughing in the background. Yet beneath it all, there was a tension that felt like a story waiting to be told. She watched Jana move quietly through the living room. Her eyes thoughtful, her expression tight. She saw Jill glance toward their father again and again, worry flickering in her eyes. She saw Jessa trying to maintain her usual confidence. But even Jessa's laughter felt slightly forced, as if she were holding something back. After dinner, when most of the siblings went outside to play with the younger kids, Jinger pulled Jana aside. What's going on? She asked gently. You're carrying something. I can feel it. Jana hesitated for a long time. Then she whispered, Jinger. Dad was reading a letter from Mom, and he hid it when he saw me. Jinger felt her heartbeat quicken. A letter from Mom? After all these years? Jana nodded. I didn't know what to say, or what to ask. But something is happening. He's different. Jinger looked toward their father, sitting alone on the porch, hands clasped together, staring at the ground as if searching for something he lost long ago. And then, a moment so small yet so powerful broke the silence. Jinger whispered, I've had dreams about Mom lately. Jana stiffened. What kind of dreams? Dreams where she looks like she wants to tell us something, Jinger said softly. Like she's trying to reach us. But she can't speak. Jana felt her chest tighten. Because Jill had said almost the same thing. And Jana herself had been waking up with a heavy, unexplained ache in her heart. The kind that didn't come from fatigue, but from memory. Something was calling them. Even if they didn't yet know what. But the moment everything changed came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Most of the family was outside. Children racing across the yard. Older siblings talking in small circles. Jana, as always, went to the attic to find a missing scrapbook. Jessa wanted to show one of the younger girls. The attic had been untouched for years. A place of old Christmas boxes, forgotten photo albums, and things tucked away by Michelle long before the cameras arrived. Jana moved a stack of blankets aside. Then paused. Something wooden peeked out from beneath the dust. A small box, old, worn, with a pale yellow ribbon tied around it. A ribbon Jana recognized instantly. Her mother used to wear that ribbon in her hair on days when she was happy. Truly happy. Jana's breath trembled. She lifted the box slowly, as if it were a living memory she wasn't ready to touch. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside were letters, dozens of letters. Each one addressed in Michelle's handwriting. To Jana, to Jill, to Jessa, to Jinger. And one more. An envelope with no name. Just 3 words. Tell the truth. Jana didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't breathe. Because in that single moment, she understood something that no camera had ever recorded. Her mother had not left this world silently. She had left behind her last words. Her last thoughts. Her last truth. Hidden in a box that her daughters were never meant to find until now. And without planning it, without knowing why, Jill appeared in the attic doorway. What's taking you? She began. Then she froze. Her eyes widened as they fell on the box, on the letters, on the handwriting. She hadn't seen since the day Michelle Duggar left them. Jessa arrived next. Then Jinger. None of them spoke. None dared to. Because they all knew, without a single word spoken, that the truth they had been feeling was connected to the truth inside that box. And as they gathered around Jana, the attic seemed to shift, like the walls themselves were preparing to reveal a piece of their mother the world had never seen. The sisters looked at one another, then at the letters. And in that quiet moment, the Duggar sisters understood. Their mother's story was not finished. It was waiting to be read. And nothing in their lives would be the same after this. The attic still held Michelle's warmth. And her grief. And her love. Jana's letter had revealed responsibility. Jill's letter had revealed inherited emotion. Now it was Jessa's turn. Jessa, who always acted strong, even when she wasn't. Jessa, whose laughter filled rooms, whose confidence steadied others, but whose heart was more fragile than she ever allowed herself to admit. She held her envelope tightly, her fingers trembling in a way she tried hard to hide. Jinger placed a comforting hand over hers. "You don't have to be strong right now," Jinger said softly. Jessa let out a shaky breath. For a moment, she didn't open the letter. She simply stared at it, the name Jessa written in Michelle's handwriting. The same handwriting that wrote notes in lunchboxes, birthday cards, and Bible verses taped to bathroom mirrors. Finally, Jessa broke the seal. The letter unfolded. Her eyes began to scan the familiar curves of her mother's writing. She swallowed hard and began reading aloud. Michelle's letter to Jessa, "To my brave sunshine, my spirited girl." Jessa's lips quivered. Her mother continued, "You were the child who ran into every room like a burst of light. You chased laughter, and laughter chased you." Jinger smiled through tears. "That sounds exactly like her," she whispered. Jessa continued, "But I also saw the moments you hid. Behind closed doors, behind quick jokes, behind that bright smile, you felt things deeply, just like your sisters. But you wouldn't let anyone see it." A tear slipped down Jessa's cheek. "And that's what I feared most," she whispered. Jana nodded softly. Jessa kept reading. "You believe that being strong meant being silent. That showing emotion meant letting people down. But, my sweet Jessa, strength is not silence." Jessa pressed the letter to her chest, her breath shaking. "Mom knew," she whispered. "She always knew." Michelle continued, "You tried to protect your sisters from sadness, from confusion, from fear. But you forgot one thing: you deserve protection too." Jessa let out a soft cry. A sound so small and heartbreaking that even Jana wiped her eyes. Jinger squeezed her hand gently. Michelle's letter moved deeper. "If you ever felt unseen, it wasn't because I didn't see you. It was because you hid your tears behind your smile faster than I could wipe them away." Jessa covered her mouth as her whole body shook. "I am sorry for every time you pretended to be strong because you thought I needed you to be. You never had to." This broke her. Jessa cried openly. A kind of crying she had avoided her entire life. The sisters held her. Michelle's final lines echoed through the attic. "Your strength was never in your toughness, Jessa. It was in your heart. And I hope one day you will allow it to break so it can grow again." Jessa lowered the letter, exhaling shakily. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to be vulnerable in front of her sisters, and they embraced her with a tenderness that felt like healing. Now it was Jinger's turn, unlike her sisters. Jinger didn't look frightened. She looked thoughtful. As if she had felt this moment coming long before Michelle ever wrote her letter. She opened her envelope. Quietly. Her hands were steady, but her eyes glistened. She read the first line aloud. Michelle's letter to Jinger, "To my artistic soul, my daughter who sees life in colors." Jinger smiled softly through tears. Michelle continued, "You were the child who watched more than you spoke. You noticed details the world overlooked. You felt truth even when no one said a word." Jana whispered, "That's so true." Jinger always saw everything. Jinger continued, "Because of that gift, you saw my sadness even when others didn't, and you carried questions in your heart that you were too afraid to ask." She paused, her breath trembling. Michelle had seen everything. You wondered why I grew quiet during certain family gatherings. You wondered why I looked out the window longer than I should have. You wondered what memory pulled me away from the room. Jinger's eyes glossed over. She had always wondered those things. Always. Michelle continued. I want you to know that nothing you ever saw was your fault. You did nothing wrong by noticing my pain. Jinger swallowed hard. You were born with intuition. A gift God gave you so you could understand people in ways they didn't understand themselves. A tear rolled down her cheek. But the next lines were the ones that struck deepest. I am sorry for the times you carried guilt for things that had nothing to do with you. I watched you question yourself more than any child should. Jinger looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. I always blamed myself. When I didn't know Mom was hurting. Michelle's final words were gentle, filled with a depth only a mother could express. If you ever feel lost in the world, my sweet girl, remember this. You see truth. You feel truth. And that is why God gave you a voice that will one day help others find theirs. Jinger lowered the letter slowly. Tears streamed silently down her face, not from sadness, but from a deep, quiet release of truth she never had the courage to say aloud. The sisters wrapped around her, their embrace soft and warm. For a moment, the attic felt like the safest place in their entire childhood home. But as their embrace loosened, their eyes drifted toward the one envelope still sitting inside the box. The envelope with no name. The envelope labeled, Tell the Truth. Jessa whispered, We've read our truths. Jill added, But this is Mom's truth. Jana nodded. It's the one she couldn't say in person. Jinger held the unnamed letter gently in her hands, and in the soft crackle of the paper, the attic seemed to breathe, as if their mother herself stood with them in that quiet room. Jinger whispered, Let's open it. Together. And with that, the final life-altering truth waited only inches away, ready to change the Duggar family's understanding of everything they thought they knew. The attic was never meant to hold secrets. It was where old Christmas ornaments lived, where outgrown clothes were stored, where forgotten toys rested in dusty corners. But on that quiet afternoon, as Jana held the wooden box with trembling hands, the attic became the heart of a truth the Duggar sisters never knew existed. Jill stepped closer first. Her breath caught the moment she recognized the handwriting on the envelopes. Her mother's handwriting, curved, soft, unmistakable. Jana! Are those? Jill's voice cracked. Jana nodded slowly. These are from Mom. Jessa, who had come upstairs to look for everyone, froze mid-step. Jinger gasped softly, her eyes already filling with tears. For a moment, none of the sisters moved. They simply stood around the small box, staring at the letters that had survived in silence for more than 2 decades. Jessa finally whispered, But why would Dad hide these? Jinger shook her head. He must have had a reason. Jill swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she whispered, Or maybe he couldn't bear the truth inside them. The sisters exchanged a glance filled with curiosity, fear, and a longing they didn't understand yet. Jana carefully lifted the first envelope. It read, To Jana, when you are ready. Those 6 words struck something deep inside her. Michelle had always spoken in that gentle, comforting way, as if she loved her daughters through every breath she ever took. Jana felt a warmth in her chest, and an ache she couldn't name. Jill picked up her envelope. To Jill, my tender-hearted girl. Her lip quivered. Jessa reached for hers. To Jessa, my brave sunshine. A tear escaped before she could stop it. Then Jinger lifted the 4th envelope. To my sweet Jinger, who sees the world in colors. That was something Michelle would say, something only a mother would know. But the final envelope, the one with no name, was the one none of them were ready for. On the front were 3 words, Tell the truth. Jessa whispered, What truth? What did Mom want to tell us? For years, tiny questions had floated inside the Duggar sisters' hearts. Questions they never spoke aloud. Why did Michelle sometimes go quiet during celebrations? Why were there days she hugged them tighter than usual? Why did she avoid talking about her own childhood? Why did she look away when certain memories were mentioned? Back then, the girls simply assumed it was sadness or fatigue or stress from raising a large family. Now, standing in the attic 40 feet above the familiar Duggar kitchen, they felt something different. They felt answers. Jill took a shaky breath and whispered, "Mom didn't leave these for no reason. She wanted us to know something. Something she couldn't say while she was alive." Jana nodded. "She wanted us to read these when we were old enough to understand." Jinger added softly, "Maybe even old enough to forgive." Jessa looked up sharply. "Forgive? Forgive what?" Jinger shook her head. "I don't know. But something tells me. These letters explain why Mom was the way she was. Why she carried certain sadness. Why Dad kept things from us." A heavy silence fell over them. Not the silence of fear. The silence of truth. Jill brushed dust off a small spot on the attic floor. "Let's sit." The sisters lowered themselves slowly, forming a circle around the box, just as they had done countless times as children when reading Bible stories together or writing notes to each other or whispering dreams only sisters could understand. But this moment felt nothing like childhood. This moment felt like opening the door to a room in their mother's heart they never knew existed. Jana looked at her sisters. "Are we ready?" Jessa wiped her cheeks. "As ready as we'll ever be." Jinger nodded silently. Jill held her letter so tightly the edges began to crinkle. One by one, they broke the seals on their envelopes until suddenly a sound echoed from downstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Familiar. Jim. Bob. The sisters froze. The footsteps climbed the first stair. Then the next. And the next. Jill's face paled. "He can't see these, not yet." Jessa whispered. "He'll try to take them away." Jinger held her breath. Jana closed the box halfway, her hands trembling. The footsteps stopped just outside the attic door. "Girls?" Jim Bob's voice was gentle, but strained. "I need to speak with you." The sisters stared at each other, a silent conversation passing between them in a single moment. Jana whispered, "Hide the letters behind you. He doesn't need to see them yet." Jim Bob opened the attic door slowly. His eyes fell on his daughters, sitting together in a circle around a box. He had hoped they would never find. His expression didn't show anger. It showed something far more heartbreaking. Fear, regret, and a sorrow that had lived inside him for more than 20 years. He stepped forward and whispered, "You found them?" Jana nodded quietly. "Yes, Dad, we found Mom's letters." Jim Bob closed his eyes, as if the moment he had dreaded for decades had finally arrived, and he whispered, "I prayed this day would never come." The attic felt different now. Not just old, not just dusty, but sacred. As if the air itself held Michelle's presence, her voice, her warmth, her unspoken pain. Jana held her envelope close, feeling the texture of the paper, thin, aged, but still carrying the unmistakable tenderness of Michelle's gentle hand. Jill sat beside her, her breathing uneven, her thumb brushing the edge of her own letter again and again. Jessa leaned forward, watchful, alert, but softer than usual, her confidence tempered by the weight of this moment. And Jinger placed her hand over her heart, closing her eyes briefly, as if to steady the memory of her mother before inviting her words into the room. Jana broke the seal first. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that her mother had left these words specifically for her. She unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Michelle's smooth curves, letters leaning gently to the right, tiny hearts in her lowercase eyes, the handwriting of a woman who always wrote with warmth. Jana began to read aloud. Michelle's letter to Jana. "My dear Jana, my firstborn daughter, my steady hand." Jana froze. Jill began to cry quietly. Jessa looked down at the floor, blinking fast. Jinger covered her mouth. Jana continued, her voice shaking. "You came into my life at a time when I was still learning how to heal from the past I never spoke about. You were my calm in the storm long before you ever knew I had lived through one. Jana felt her throat close. Her eyes blurred. Her mother continued. You always understood things without my saying a word. You watched over your siblings with a heart far older than your age. Sometimes I worried I leaned on you too much. A single tear slid down Jana's cheek. Because she had carried so much, so many responsibilities. So many expectations, so much silence, and she never once complained. Michelle went on. If you ever felt that I disappeared into myself at times, I want you to know it was never because of you. It was because the little girl I once was still cried in the corners of my heart. Jill let out a soft, broken sob. Her hand found Jana's knee. Jana wiped her cheek. But the tears kept coming. The pain of my childhood was something I hid from everyone, even your father, because I feared people would see me differently if they knew the truth. Jessa whispered. She carried all of that alone. Jinger nodded silently. Jana kept reading. I endured fear as a child in ways I never wanted my own children to feel. I lived in a home where love existed, but it was not always safe. There were nights I prayed just to feel unafraid. The sisters froze. Michelle had never said anything like this. Not once. Jill's tears flowed openly now. She never told us. She never told anyone. Jana's voice trembled as she continued. When I became your mother, I promised myself none of my children would ever feel the fear I felt. But sometimes the memories return without warning. She paused, catching her breath. The next lines felt like a confession their mother had waited her whole life to make. If you ever saw sadness in my eyes, Jana, it was never because of you. It was the echo of a childhood I spent my entire adulthood trying to outrun. Jinger sobbed quietly, pressing her face into her hands. Jessa's eyes glistened, her jaw tightening in an attempt to stay composed. But even she couldn't hold back emotion. Jana continued. I want you to hear this clearly, my sweet girl. You became the reason I believed I could be a different mother than the one I had. Jana broke, but she kept reading through tears. You have always carried more than your share. And I am sorry for the weight you never asked to bear. Sereno, Jill. The real middle sister whispered quietly. That sounds exactly like Mom. She always worried about Jana taking too much on. Jana sniffed softly and read the final lines. If my silence ever hurt you, please forgive me. I was learning how to heal even as I was raising you. And you, my dear Jana, helped me heal more than you will ever understand. The letter ended with a final, trembling line. I love you with a depth born from struggle, and a joy born from being your mother. Jana pressed the letter to her chest, her shoulders shaking with sobs she had held back for years. Jill wrapped her arms around her. Jessa leaned in next, followed by Jinger, until all four Duggar sisters held each other the way they once did as children, before life got complicated. Before responsibilities grew heavy, before the world watched them grow on camera. When the tears softened, Jill whispered, Mom wasn't hiding from us. She was hiding the hurt she didn't want us to carry. Jinger nodded. This letter explains everything. The quiet days, the tired eyes, the times she seemed far away. Jessa's voice shook. We judged her sometimes. We didn't mean to, but we did. Jana wiped her face, and she forgave us before we even knew we needed forgiveness. The attic fell silent again, but this silence was warm, healing, filled with the presence of a mother's love that had waited 20 years to speak. But the letters for Jill, Jessa and Jinger still lay unopened in the unnamed envelope. The one labeled, Tell the Truth, waited like a storm the sisters did not yet see coming. Jana took a shaky breath. This was Mom's truth for me. She whispered. Jill held her own envelope tightly. But what was her truth for the rest of us? And with that question, the doorway to the next revelation swung quietly open. After Jana finished reading her letter, the attic fell into a silence so deep, so sacred, that none of the Duggar sisters dared to move. Jill held her own envelope against her chest, her fingers pressing tightly into the paper, not from fear, but from the overwhelming tenderness that had always defined her. Jill had been the emotional center of the sisters. She felt everything, joy, sadness, tension, peace, all more deeply than anyone else. Even as a little girl, she cried when others were hurting, laughed when others laughed, and carried burdens no one asked her to carry. Now, for the first time in her life, she was about to see what her mother had seen in her heart. Jinger placed a gentle hand on Jill's back. Jessa wiped her own tears and whispered, "Jill, take your time. We're here." Jill nodded, her breath trembling, and carefully broke the seal. The paper inside was soft, worn at the edges as if Michelle had held it many times. Before writing her final words, Jill opened it slowly. Her mother's handwriting greeted her like a voice she had tried for decades to remember. Perfectly. She began to read. Michelle's letter to Jill. My sweet Jill, my tender-hearted one. You were the child who felt everything I couldn't say. Jill closed her eyes as tears slipped silently down her cheeks. This wasn't just a letter. This was Michelle speaking directly to her heart. She continued reading. From the moment you learned to walk, I saw something in your eyes that reminded me of myself, not the pain, but the empathy. Jessa whispered softly. That's exactly Jill. Jill kept going. You were the one who noticed when my smiles felt too heavy. You were the one who held onto my dress on days when my heart felt fragile. You always sensed the storms long before anyone else saw the clouds. Jill pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to steady her breathing. She remembered moments, tiny, almost forgotten moments, when Michelle would sit quietly, lost in thought, and Jill would instinctively hug her waist without knowing why. Michelle's letter continued. If I ever seemed distant, if ever I fell silent in the middle of a joyful day, it was never because of you. It was because my past was louder than the present. Jana closed her eyes. Jinger stared at the floor. Jessa clenched her jaw to hold back tears. They finally understood. Jill continued. My childhood was not gentle. I grew up learning to survive emotions I never had the chance to understand. So when you felt too much, Jill, it wasn't your burden. It was mine. Jill began to sob softly. Jinger wrapped her arm around her. Michelle's voice through her handwriting moved deeper. I saw how often you cried without knowing the reason. I saw how you tried to fix things that were never yours to fix. You carried my sadness even when I tried to hide it from you. Jessa whispered. She saw everything, even the things Jill tried to hide. Jill wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers and kept reading. I am sorry, my sweet girl, for the weight you carried that belonged to me. I never wanted you to inherit my shadows. Silence again. Thick, heavy, full of tears. Michelle continued. You grew up believing that strong people don't cry. But I want you to know, your tears were never weakness. They were your gift. Jill covered her eyes with both hands as her body shook with emotion. Jana leaned forward, holding her tightly. Jinger and Jessa joined, their arms wrapped around Jill as if creating a shield against every hurt she had ever held. But Michelle's letter wasn't finished. When you became a mother, I watched you love your children with a gentleness so pure it made me believe that my story could end in healing. Jinger exhaled shakily. Jessa looked away, her own chest aching with unspoken memories. Michelle's final lines felt like the closing of a chapter none of the daughters even knew existed. Forgive me for the days you felt alone. Forgive me for the sadness you absorbed from me. And forgive yourself for every tear you shed thinking something was wrong with you. Jill cried harder. Her mother's last sentence was written faintly, as though her hand had trembled. You were my heart's softness, Jill. And you still are. When Jill lowered the letter, she wasn't just crying. She was finally releasing 20 years of quiet confusion she had never spoken aloud. Jana held her. Jinger whispered soothing words. Even Jessa cried openly now, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Jill whispered through tears. All those years? I thought I was too emotional. But Mom, she understood me. She really understood me. Jana nodded, her voice gentle. She didn't want you to carry her pain. But you carried her love. Jinger added softly. And her letter is proof that she saw your heart even when we didn't. Jessa leaned in. Mom wasn't apologizing for who you were. Jill, she was thanking you for who you became. The sisters hugged again, long, tight. The way sisters do, when truth pulls down walls they didn't know were standing. But something still lingered in the attic. The letter for Jessa. The letter for Jinger. And the unlabeled envelope? Tell the truth. Jill looked toward it with a mixture of fear and understanding. Whatever is in that last letter, she whispered. It's something Mom wanted all of us to know. Jana nodded. And it will change everything. The wooden attic felt still, as though even the air was holding its breath. Jana, Jill, Jessa, and Jinger sat shoulder to shoulder. Their mother's individual letters folded carefully beside them. They wiped their tears. But their hearts remained wide open. And then Jinger held up the last envelope. It was the only one without a daughter's name. Without a hint. Without a clue. Just 3 handwritten words in soft, faded ink. Tell the truth. The room instantly felt heavier. Not frightening heavy, but meaningful heavy. Like a door inside their family was about to open after being locked for decades. Jinger handed the envelope to Jana. You're the eldest, she whispered. You should read it. Jana hesitated. Her hands trembled. But she broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. But thicker, more worn. As if Michelle had rewritten it many times before finally deciding what to leave behind. Jana unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shakier. Not like the other letters. As if Michelle had struggled to write these last words, but knew they needed to be spoken. Jana began reading. Michelle's final letter, to all of you, my precious girls. If you are reading this, it means you are older now. Old enough to understand what I could never say when you were still young. The sisters leaned closer, breathing shallow. Eyes locked on the letter. Jana read on. There is a truth I carried my entire life that shaped the way I mothered you. The way I loved you. And the way I sometimes hid inside myself. Jill gripped Jessa's hand tightly. Michelle continued. I grew up in a home where silence was normal. Where pain was kept behind closed doors. Where a child's fears were dismissed as imagination. Jessa's breath hitched. Michelle had never, not once, spoken of her childhood. I learned to live quietly, to never burden anyone. To pretend everything was fine even when my heart was breaking. Jinger wiped tears quietly. Michelle's next words were the heaviest yet. There was someone in my childhood who hurt me. The sisters froze. Their hearts stopped. Michelle had written. Not always. And not in ways the world would notice. But enough that a piece of me never felt safe. Jana felt tears spill down her face. The sisters held each other tightly. Michelle's letter continued. I carried that fear through my teenage years. Through my marriage. And even into motherhood. Jill whispered. Mom. You didn't deserve that. Jessa wept silently. Michelle wrote. You girls were my healing. Each of you brought back a part of my joy that I had lost long before you were born. The sisters cried harder. But Michelle wasn't done. I hid my past because I did not want it to shape your future. I wanted the cycle to end with me. Jana whispered. She was protecting us. The whole time. Then the letter shifted. Michelle's handwriting grew softer. But here is the truth I need you to hear. You must never be silent about your pain. The sisters froze. Jill let out a quiet sob. Michelle continued. You each inherited my strength. But I don't want you to inherit my silence. Jinger covered her mouth. If you are hurting, speak. If you are afraid, reach out. If you need one another, hold on. Her next lines were written in a darker pen, as if she had rewritten them slowly, intentionally. Pain grows in silence. Love grows in truth. The sisters cried in unison. Michelle's final confession broke every heart in the attic. I wanted to tell you these things myself. But I ran out of time. Jana gasped softly. Jessa cried openly now. Jill pressed her face into her hands. Jinger clutched her chest. Michelle's very last paragraph felt like a blessing and a plea. So I leave you with this truth. The truth I never said out loud. You are stronger than my past. You are my healing. And together, you are the voice I never had. And the final sentence. Tell the truth. So your daughters will never need to write letters like mine. Silence in the Their sisters didn't move. They didn't speak. They simply existed in a storm of love and grief that washed over them like a wave 20 years in the making. Jill cried the hardest, her entire body shaking as she finally understood the sadness she had seen in Michelle's eyes as a child. Jessa pressed her forehead to her knees, her strong exterior crumbling. Jinger held her heart, grasping the full meaning of the truth she had always sensed. And Jana, the eldest daughter, the quiet protector, held the letter against her chest as tears fell silently onto the paper. The healing begins. After a long moment, Jana whispered, "Mom wasn't weak. She was strong, so strong, that she carried her entire past so we wouldn't have to." Jill nodded quietly. "And she wanted us to break the silence she lived with." Jessa wiped her face. "We will. We're not children anymore." Jinger took a deep breath. "And we won't hide from the truth. Not hers. Not ours." The sisters held each other again. A long, trembling, powerful embrace. For the first time in years, they felt connected in a way no camera had ever captured, not as TV sisters, not as public figures, not as the Duggar daughters, but as four women who shared the same mother, the same silence, the same truth. And now, the same mission. To speak, to heal, to break the cycle. Together. The epilogue of the hidden SEA Soen, as they walked down from the attic. Letters pressed carefully to their hearts. The world outside still didn't know what they had discovered. But something inside the Duggar family had shifted forever. No reality show. No social media silence. No public speculation. Only four sisters carrying their mother's truth into the future, not as a burden, but as a legacy. A legacy of honesty, of healing, of finally speaking what Michelle could not. And that is how the hidden season of the Duggar sisters came to an end, not with scandal, not with conflict, but with truth. A truth written in their mother's hand. A truth that changed them forever.